Jeff Morrill co-founded Planet Subaru, your dealership, in 1998 and built it into one of the most successful privately held car dealerships in United States. He later started other businesses in automotive retail, real estate, telecommunications, and insurance that generated over $100 million in annual revenue. His achievements of building profitable and ethical companies have been featured in a variety of national media, including USA Today, Entrepreneur Magazine, Automotive News, and the Boston Globe, and others. Jeff is the author of Profit Wise: How to Make More Money in Business by Doing the Right Thing. He donates all income from the book to Population Services International, a global health organization with programs targeting malaria, child survival, HIV, and reproductive health. All right. Well, Jeff, I'm excited just to be able to talk to you, and you know, you've been in the business and retail, real estate, telecommunications, generated over $100 million in revenue, and starting from scratch. And you know, there's a lot of really great information in your book, and I'm really excited to have you here to just break down and talk about the things that Profit Wise teaches people, and maybe we can drill down and share it with everyone.
Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, your why of what led you to write this book and start an ethical business, right? What was your why for this?
The theme of the book, which came way after the business, but let's start with that. So the name of the book is called Profit Wise: How to Make More Money in Business by Doing the Right Thing. And that's the distilled language that I finally came to after 20 years of actually doing the thing I set out to do, which is to find a way to earn our living and do really well, but to pull a lot of other people along with us. So it's I guess at base you could say it's a win-win philosophy. And we're trying to find a way to avoid zero-sum games, create situations where I can accomplish what I want to accomplish, which is earning a living. That they see the merits of wanting to come back again and again, send their friends in and all that. So it's just pretty simple customer service on the one hand, but it's deeper than that. And the part I want to just focus on briefly, and the big idea that we open up the dealership with, is what's wrong with the industry, the auto retail industry, and what was really wrong with it, and still sort of wrong with it, is that it's very exploitive. I guess the theory that I think a lot of dealerships then, and still too many now, use is this notion of hunting customers. And I liked the metaphor more of farming, so that we grow together, you know, more
Right.
organic kind of approach to this, so that no one had to die, no one had to lose their money for me to gain it, but rather how can we win together? And that drives a lot of different philosophies, a lot of strategies that we execute every day in the business. So one of the things we do, like if you have a really bad service visit for whatever reason that we actually screwed up, which doesn't happen very often, but does, or someone has the perception that we really screwed up, we're just not going to argue about it. We're not going to wait for you to call your attorney. And we're just going to refund your money and send you on your way. And if you don't like us, that's okay. You don't need to come back. There are a lot of other people that can keep us in business. And we just didn't want to have that level of antagonism that was very familiar and common to people, you know, just fighting for over every dollar of small sums. So we just made a decision on, we're not going to do that. So we're not there to be exploited. You know, if someone's trying to take advantage of us, you know, when we've had those customers, every once in a while you get someone who buys a used car and goes out and drives it like a maniac and damages the tires or something and wants us to put the tires on, you know, brand new tires 3,000 miles later. I mean, you get those, but we didn't organize our business around trying to protect ourselves from those people. we've organized our business around trying to do the right thing by the majority of people that are also trying to do the right thing. So I think in a nutshell, that captures it pretty well.
Right. And the ethical businesses, and with that, from that as a foundation, coming from your heart and doing things the right way instead of like, hunting and killing something to eat when you can, everything can live and prosper. That's the space. And car salesmen have a reputation, right, being kind of pushy. And, looking through your book, you talk about how you became a smooth listener, right, instead of a smooth talker. And that really jumped out at me. It's kind of cool. Maybe break that down a little bit there.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I appreciate that. And unfortunately, because of this format, I'm not going to get a chance to demonstrate my very hard-won knowledge in this area, because usually I just don't talk very much anymore. And as a young guy, I thought I had all the answers, and I'd be in a room of people, and if there were 10 people, I'd do 50% of the talking instead of 10% or even less. And now in a room of 10 people, I talk about 2 or 3% of the time. So part of it is just that idea of being a smooth listener, is recognizing the value of shutting up. And I think that's way underestimated in society, because we teach too many people, I think, growing up, that's how you demonstrate dominance or you demonstrate intelligence. But I don't buy that. I think over time I've learned that the way you really connect with people is to first create the space for them to walk into it. If you're just pushing everybody out of the way by talking too much, there's no room for them to open up or share what they know, or educate you, particularly if they're a little more introverted and don't feel comfortable asserting themselves. So a big part for me is just step one is stop talking. And then step two is to draw people out by asking good questions. And some of those questions I've learned, like at cocktail parties, I don't lead with what do you do? I'm more interested in having questions that are more open-ended. That people can take a lot of different directions. So instead of what do you do for a living, maybe I'd ask, what problems do you solve? Or what are the things that you're thinking about right now? And if someone wants to talk about their work in that context, great. I'm happy to listen to it. But I haven't steered them to a topic where they've got to define themselves in terms of what they do for a living, which might not be how they want to define themselves. They might be an engineer for a living, but what they're really interested in is composing music. And if that's what they're interested in, that's what I want to hear about. And so I think those are a couple of things that I've learned over time. I was not born with those nuggets. I just discover them over time, and now I put them into practice, and my life is much richer for it, because the old cliche about how you're not learning anything while you're talking is very true. Until you stop talking and let other people comment and hear what they have to say, then you really don't have anything to learn. So I'll stop talking right now.
Well, that's words of wisdom, though. That's been a motif inside of my life, where you can't hear if you're talking, you can't listen. And so if we all listened a little more, there'd be better communication, and that covers everything. And I'm not, just a legacy wealth strategist. My heart is writing inspirational music. So you hit that one. And that's, your come from again. And it's not, you've been so successful, $100 million and all this, but you've had to manage people and systems and all kinds of situations. There's a lot of mistakes people make. And what would you say just off the top? Because there's a lot of struggling entrepreneurs and successful ones that listen to these shows and want to know how to get to the next level.
So let's focus the question a little bit, and this is I've made most of those mistakes. But what are you talking about in terms of opening up a business, in terms of scaling a business, in terms of marketing a business, in terms of recruiting the help? Like where are the? I mean, you're working with business people. Where do you think the pain point is? Is it a revenue issue? Is it an operational issue? I mean, you tell me what you'd like me to focus on.
Okay. Well, you can start with revenue and then scaling up the business.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on the yeah, golly, where do I start? Maybe the thing that I see a lot of small business people miss, and I wouldn't necessarily apply this to big companies or anything, but I'm just thinking about the people that work with me, whether it's landscapers or carpenters or all the people that you need to interact with on a frequent basis just to keep your house from falling down. A lot of those people don't seem to understand that they don't need a lot of customers to stay in business if the customers they have keep calling them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they want the customers to keep calling them, then they have to deliver good service. And I think that's where revenue is connected to operational excellence. That if you're not able to return a phone call, if you're not able to show up on time, if you're not able to keep your commitments, then people are going to stop calling you. And so you've got to go out and find more people. So I guess the conclusion on that particular question would be, I think investments in making sure that you can follow through on your commitments and the commitments of any team members, employees that you have. You're going to get that investment back. You want people that can honor commitments and actually do the work. And so a lot of that for small business people requires looking in the mirror. When's the last time you showed up late for an appointment or made a commitment to someone that you would have a deliverable, whatever that was, whether it was a construction project or a document or whatever it was, by a certain time, and then you just missed it. And these are the questions that I see. I think a lot of small business people, at least the ones that I interact with, would benefit a lot from asking those questions. As far as the other half of the question about scaling it, I guess we need to get into the specifics of. I don't have any general wisdom on scaling a business. We'd have to look at maybe a specific instance. But let me just try to imagine one. I remember talking with the tree cutter. I live on a wooded property that has a lot of trees that need to be cut because we have a long driveway. So I talked to him a lot. And we had this very conversation. He'd like to have more time to spend with his family. And right now he's leading crews all the time. He's always out, a single crew. He's actually out there having to direct this team of people who are cutting the trees. So he doesn't have time to do the estimates. He doesn't have time to grow his business and work on his business, So for him, the map looked a little to me like he needed another team. So that he would have two teams instead of one, and then he would have sufficient revenue to afford an operations manager. And then that operations manager could do all the time-consuming stuff he was doing instead of the owner of the business having to do it all. So he had to get to that. He had to work harder to grow to that point where he could then take it easy, if that makes sense. It's almost like he had to input more effort in the short term to get to that scale where he had the revenue to run the business the way he really wanted to run it.
Right, exactly. And it is. The owner ends up trying to do everything, and then it's what you talk a lot about in the book, and the hiring and getting the right team member inside of there. And why is it never the wrong time to hire the right person?
Yeah. So over the years, we've had occasions. You're referring to a topic in the book, and,
right?
We've had situations where people have shown up and we didn't have the position open, but it was a really good person. Like it was someone that if we were looking, we would hire that person. And if you're a company with one or two people, and the perfect future employee shows up, then you might just be out of luck, other than to try to stay in touch with the person and hope that the place they end up between now and the time you actually need them is not very satisfying, such that you can attract them later. But what would happen with us? I'll give you an example. We had 6 salespeople early in our dealership history, and a person showed up. His name was Bob, and the story ends well. But anyway, we just didn't have an opening, and I made the mistake of saying we don't have an opening, even though I thought he was great. He was going to be a really good salesperson, and then I had encouraged him to find another dealership in the area that was similar in terms of their ethics and philosophy to us, that I thought he'd do well at. And he actually did. He went and applied there, and he didn't have a very good experience. And so he came back and he said, "Are you sure? Are you sure you don't have any opening?" And so we said, "You know what? We're going to hire you anyway, and we're going to find something to do with you. Like, we're going to find a way. We have a company that's big enough." And so we created a role for him as an assistant to one of our really successful salespeople, and he would ultimately become a sales manager. And he recently retired a couple of years ago after spending 15 years with us. And so that experience reminded me about how important it is to recognize that you don't have this constant stream of really qualified people knocking on your door. It doesn't happen very often, actually. You can run an ad, and it happens to us almost more often than not. We'll go through a 30, 60, 90-day recruiting process trying to find and get no actual person we can hire to meet the bar that we have. And it's a reasonable bar, but it's a high bar. So if you get someone that just shows up when you're not looking, then you're well advised to work really hard to find some place in your company to hang on to that person,
Right.
because you're going to need that person sooner rather than later.
Right. Good one. Yeah. So, in your book, you write about why people should live with love in the model, right? And anyway, that just caught my attention. Maybe you could kind of open that up a little bit. I know
Sure.
it's
Yeah, let me introduce the concept. So my dad's a retired geography professor from Virginia Tech. So he's been many years training a couple, 3 generations worth of young people, preparing them for citizenship in the work world. And at some point, it occurred to him that simply preparing them to do a job was not the whole mission of his job as an educator. He needed to make sure that the people leaving his classroom were prepared to serve the world in some way too. His job wasn't just technical to get
yeah.
skills, but rather how to be good to one another, because that's the whole point of our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you miss that, you've missed the bus,
Yeah.
So anyway, he describes that notion as having love in your model. And I think that the model in this case being your strategy or your business culture or whatever organization you're in. Can you say that the at a primary function, it can't be the only function, because you need to turn a profit and you need to earn a living, you need to comply with laws and all that stuff. So I'm not saying it's the only function, but included in your model, your business model or your nonprofit model, your consulting model, do you have love built in? In other words, do you have a way to make sure that you're taking care of your people? Internally, externally, it might be your employees or customers or people in the community that depend on you. And when love in the model is missing from an organization, all sorts of bad things happen. That's Enron. And, Enron blew up. And I could give you a list as long as my arms of organizations that have destroyed themselves
Right.
because they couldn't incorporate love in the model. But I want to add a part just in terms of my own life so I'm 50 now. I opened up my first business at 26. So I've spent almost half my life owning my own business. And when I look back now at some of the decisions that I made earlier, I guess there was nothing illegal or tragic or unethical about some of the mistakes I made. I wouldn't describe them in those terms, but there were times, I mentioned, getting into arguments with customers early. And I remember early in the life of the company, giving customers maybe more grief about something, if they had a complaint, and I guess I didn't appreciate the thing that I do now about just how hard it is for everybody to get through life. I don't care how rich you are, how famous,
Right.
how fit, how healthy, whatever. It's hard for everybody, and it took me till later in my life to understand that everybody is in need of something, and I just philosophically, I just want to be a part of that solution. Not that I can solve everybody's problems, but I just don't want to create problems if I can avoid creating problems, particularly if it's something that I can give. So as our profitability increased over the years, it made it easier for us to take that big picture. And I wish I had known it was going to turn out as well as it did, because I'd send myself a check, my old the old version of me from today, with a big slush fund to say, just if there's money at stake, just use this fund that your older self sent to you to pay for it, so that you can help people out. And
Right.
and I think that for particularly the younger members of your audience, if they can imagine what their life is going to be like someday when things are a little easier, it will make it a little more easy for them to incorporate love in the model.
That's it right there. I'm in like 100% with you, and I could see it in my own transition midlife, when I made that, the give back, putting love there first instead of me, me, me. The whole energy shifted, because money is just energy. So the whole thing shifted, and so much more fulfilling to be able to help people that are along the way, that are just starting or have different problems, any kind of problems. That it is so fulfilling, and that's why we're here. Is supposed to love one another and not, be fighting all the time, right?
Well, yeah, sure. And I'm interested, if you, I'd like to hear you elaborate on that. What was the inflection point where that changed? Like, what caused the shift? Was it a single event? Was it a health crisis? Was it just a gradual evolution, a lifting of the fog over the course of your middle age, where you said, oh, I see something differently now than I previously saw it? I'm just interested in what your experience with that was.
That's a great question, because what I've found in my journey, and I'm, a couple decades older than you are, in the time sequence, was everything that had made me change was something traumatic. I wouldn't just change on my own because I'm such a great person. No, it took a shocking event. So the shocking event for me was my husband passing away, and within 5 days my mommy passing away. And I never really believed in death. I never bought into obviously we'll live forever, that I have that mindset of eternal life, and the way I was brought up. So it devastated me. My whole life was serving my husband, and living together, and all that, and now all of a sudden it's gone. And my business was successful. I could have just retired. And what I saw was a pattern, because I'd been in it for 3 decades, was a pattern that people had with their money, and you can make millions of dollars or not, paycheck to paycheck. It was the same pattern. Nobody's taught about it. You go to school, you learn how to make money, you get out of school, what do? Go make money and give it to somebody else to gamble. And so the second thing that shocked me was, like, it's a roulette wheel. Simultaneously, when this happened, I saw a lot of my clients lose their money in the stock market. And here they are, 70, 80. It almost makes me want to cry. And they come into my office and they were crying. They lost 40, 60% of their pension. And now that, their lifestyle changed. And they still had food, but it wasn't the same kind of food. It wasn't the same level they were used to. So all of those events just simultaneously shocked me. And then I met one of my business partners, and she was, I was born in wealth, and she was born in poverty. And, we'd be hanging out, talking and things. And she said, there's a lot more of me than there is of you. And so I realized that I had something special in the way that I do my business that was unique than, just a financial planner selling products. It was a lifestyle. It was health, wealth, peace of mind, being one with God. That's where I come from. And so that shock, and where I was at in life, like, wait a minute, I'm only halfway through here. What what's the way that I can give back to help other people that are just like me that are struggling. So that was the core of what made me go, okay, now I'm going to encapsulate. I wrote my number one best-selling book, Ready for Pre-Retirement, and I encapsulated 3 things that I saw people miss. So that's what got me started. Thanks for asking the question, that because that's my heart. And when I leave and meet my maker, I want to be clear. I want to be clear that I did the best, that I was kind to you. It doesn't matter who you are. You do this, you do that. We're here. We're supposed to love each other and help each other. And if I saw something, in somebody, then I'd be able to help them. So I saw that what I knew was different than the conversation in the mainstream, and I needed to digitalize that. And that's my nonprofit, is to creating these programs to teach the youth in inner cities or people in all levels, right, about what I do. So that was the reboot right there.
Okay. Yeah. For me, that was, I think I had to get to the point where I felt like I had enough. And I'm going to put enough in quotes.
Yeah.
Because I spent, we grew up in rural Virginia, and we didn't come from money. So when we opened with a shoestring, my brother and I bought a bankrupt Subaru dealership because that's what we could afford. And it had been losing tens of thousands of dollars a month before we bought it. So it was underwater from the moment we got it, and we had to turn it around very quickly, or we were going to lose what little capital we had. And anyway, so I lost a lot of sleep worrying about making payroll and finding the right people, and just, kind of getting this freight train from literally figuratively sliding back down a hill and pulling it, getting it moving the right direction. And it was only when I finally got to the point where I was like, it's okay. Like, we can make payroll, that I finally relaxed into it. And that gave me the space to start thinking beyond just what's important to me right now. And I would have liked to, I'd love to tell you that could have happened to me earlier. It just didn't. And the one prayer I would have for your younger audience members, or maybe it's older audience members whose businesses haven't hit that point yet, is to have the confidence that day will eventually come. So in anticipation of that, start thinking about how you can broaden your perspective today, even if you haven't reached the shore financially.
Right. Start today, too. It's kind of a little stressful times people in, and I know you probably got a great tip on how business owners can avoid burnout, because there's a lot of people that are maxing out, right? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it has to start with healthy boundaries. Like, you have to understand yourself to know what are the things that are going to sustain your energy and what are the things that are going to take your energy. And let me make that more specific, because that's sort of a general comment, maybe a little confusing. But I guess for me, what I didn't do, the mistake I made, is that I thought my energy and my discipline was a limitless resource. And so I just spent it and spent it and spent it. When we opened up, I was working 7 days a week. Once we stopped working 7 days a week, this is a 7-day-a-week business, what we're open, it's retail. Then we went to six days, and I did that for probably 10 years. And then I finally went to 5 days. And by the time I went to 5 days, all those 7-day and 6-day weeks had consumed much more of that exhaustible resource, which is my life force, than I had realized. And so I think it's important for people, while they're working really hard, you've opened up a business, there's a sprint factor there. You're going to have to really put in the time, but you can't keep that pace going indefinitely. You have to know, you have to define the boundaries of what you're willing to sacrifice. And the more intentionality you can bring to that, the better. And that might be a negotiation, a favorable, healthy negotiation with your spouse about turning off your work phone when you walk through the door, or coming home at certain times, or working a certain number of days. I think the more you can define it for yourself and as a family, and then try to be accountable to that, the more likely you are to avoid the situation I found myself in, which was like shocked one day when I pulled into the dealership parking lot in my 40s, like early 40s, and I took the key out of the ignition of the car and I couldn't walk in the door. It was this bizarre thing. Like, I mean, I didn't know what to do with it because it's not like I've had any trouble. My legs could have carried me in the door. I was just stuck in the driver's seat thinking about everything I had to do that day that I didn't want to do.
Right.
I had been doing so much stuff I didn't want to do for so long without paying attention at all to its impact on my marriage and my health and my psyche that eventually it caught up with me. And for other people, they tell the same story. It's a heart attack, or it's their wife filing for divorce, or whatever it is, their kid that won't talk to them anymore. And that was my instance. So the more you can anticipate that moment where you're not going to be able to work that hard into the future, it's a good time to start thinking about it earlier rather than later.
Right. These are such great tips. I mean, if I knew back then what I know now, right? And
Yeah, well, that's why we're talking, so that the people can make sense of of our mistakes, right?
right, right. And so I want to encourage everybody that's listening to this. We'll have links below to check out ProfitWise. The book is just such a resource. I skimmed through it and I'm going back again because, I wanted to have, take the time to read it. Everybody should take the time to read it and get it. Tell me where again they can go to get your book, ProfitWise.
So they can order the book, and also if they don't have the $13 to buy the book, which I understand because I couldn't always buy every book that I wanted to, then go to jeffmorrill.com. It's Jeff, Morrill, 2 R's, 2 L's, and an I in the middle, with a whole bunch of other resources there too. So if you can't afford the book, I have chapters that the publisher couldn't fit in the book, and there are a lot of other resources that people can use in their small and medium-sized businesses to learn from the mistakes we made and benefit from all the hard work that we did, so they don't have to.
That's great. Yeah. And I can tell that when you don't forget your roots, right? How you were brought up and remember not having money and, what it's like to go that, that's the heartfulness that keeps you connected. But I'm a little curious because you just did this, you've learned some interesting things, with the publishing, how it was set up. And a lot of people that listen to this show are authors and speakers and people that have a blessing to share and they want to write a book. So what would you suggest in someone writing their first book, or what you've learned?
Yeah, I don't know how representative I am. Well, let me just tell you about my experience. It was very humbling because I started the book. I had very severely injured myself, so I broke my leg in a mountain biking accident. So I had months on the couch. I couldn't move. It took me a year to learn how to walk again. So I had a lot of time on the couch, and all these ideas have been in my head. And I figured, well, rather than just watch a bunch of television or do puzzles or whatever, let me see if I can, really do something I want to do with this unexpected gift. If you can call breaking your femur in 5 places an unexpected gift, but whatever, the world delivers. Right. So anyway, I wrote the book, and people, I had some knowledgeable friends in the publishing industry, and people had written books before, and they said, just so you know, there's a lot of content out there chasing an audience. And there are many, many, many more books written than publishers can find a home for. So write the best book you can, but just understand that it's going to be very difficult to find an agent. And if you don't have an agent, it's going to be very difficult to find a publisher. So I heard all that, and it turned out to be true, exactly what they told me, that no one misrepresented the situation at all. I just really believed in the content of what I had to share. And so I was willing to take the risk. And it turns out I was able to find an agent. It was very hard. I queried hundreds, literally hundreds. They call it querying, where you send your proposal to agents in the hope that someone will see some potential and want want to take that project on because they're commission based. So they need to believe that they're going to find a publisher before they're willing to take it on. So I did find an agent, and after a year, she was not able to find a publisher for it. So she said, "Sorry, I can't find a publisher." Fortunately, there are publishers, the proper publishers, who will accept unagented manuscripts. And so I queried all of those publishers. This is a lot of work because you got
It's a lot of work, right?
and find that the publishers that do, because there's no sense in just flinging out emails at people. You want to find
Right.
the right publisher. There's no sense in sending a nonfiction book to a publisher that does only fiction. You're just wasting your time and theirs. So it takes a lot of effort, and I was willing to do it because I really believed in it. And I finally found a publisher who was willing to do it. And my bar was, I just didn't want a vanity press. I'm not saying that's a bad option for someone to just pay to have someone print a book, but I knew I wanted the benefits that a proper publisher could.
Right.
I didn't want to pay someone to publish it. I wanted to find a publisher that believed in it enough that they were willing to commit all the resources that they need to commit to make it a success. And I think there's probably exactly one of those in the world. And fortunately, I was able to find that publisher. But anyway, the way I opened this up is very humbling because I came from, it was not easy, but by the time I was in my 40s, a lot of things had gone right. I made a lot of mistakes, but things were going pretty well. You mentioned that we have businesses that combined currently generate about 130 million in annual sales revenue. So we've got a freight train. That freight train I mentioned that was sliding backwards down the train is now rolling down the tracks. And I'd grown accustomed to being able to call people and have them return my phone call. If we needed a loan, I could call up a bank and every banker I called would call me back or whatever it was. And so in publishing, no one knows, I'm not a famous person. No one knew me as a writer. It was my first book. It was very humbling to start out from the bottom. And so I would prepare after that story of sharing my particular experience with your listeners. I guess I'd sum up by saying, be prepared to start from the very bottom all over again if you've had success in some other way, because just because you're a really successful martial artist or successful lawyer or successful person in any other realm, if you're not well known, then you're going to have to work really hard to find a publisher that's willing to bet on your ability to find an audience for your content.
Right. Exactly. Well, you obviously have found it, and you've always how you just look so relaxed. And I mean, here you are, massive annual income in all of these companies. How do you do it? I mean, there's the management, the mind, you have a special kind of a brain that can manage all of those companies, right? Or you have picked some really good people to help.
Yes, there's the solution, because I have a curious mind. That's for sure. I'm not sure I'm saying that in a complimentary way about myself or not. But one of the things I will have no modesty about, because we've done it really well, and we talk about how we've done it in the book, is we've been really good at finding exceptional people and then retaining them. And over the years, we can grow them, into the skill sets that we need them to have. So if you have that ability to find talent, hang on to talent, and grow talent, then I don't have to be expert at all those things. And I'll give you an example. Like I know very little about accounting. I was a political science and communication studies major in college. I never took the first accounting class. I never took the first business class, unless you count, I guess it was a communications marketing class or something. So I'm not very well educated in a formal way about things. I still I can barely get around an Excel spreadsheet, but that's okay because we have people for that. And
right.
So really what I'm required to do is just help these smart people make good decisions and make sure now, as I get more senior in the organization, have less day-to-day function, is just to make sure that we retain our commitment to the promise we opened the business with, which is to give our customers an experience that's atypical and superior to what the customers will find somewhere else. So as long as we stay true to that commitment, then then that's my job, is keep everybody pointing in the right direction.
That's great. And you obviously have done it. And again, I want to encourage everybody to check out ProfitWise, because that they can follow in your footsteps and learn. We all got to learn from each other. So this has been a super call. I appreciate you sharing. I feel like we just scraped the surface here, because I really want to talk to you about the hiring. I've always had that problem, and there's a lot we can go into here. But again, they can get the book at jeffmorrill.com, MORRILL.com, and you got all kinds of goodies there. I checked it out, and you're very helpful. You're very kind to share what you've been given. Is there anything, a thought for the day you want to leave with everybody?
Yeah, I've got so many. Let me choose one, because I've been thinking on so many themes. I guess it's maybe a suggestion for people who are working so hard right now, is to imagine what their lives are going to be like when they don't have to work so hard. And what I'm hoping is that somehow in that imagination, that might influence what they're doing today. So in other words, I see so many business owners, and I was one of them, who gave up their youth, and in some cases their middle age, and I know some business owners are giving up their old age, trying to earn a sufficient amount of money. But then they get to the point in their lives where their health isn't there, or maybe they've lost a spouse, or the people they thought that they were going to get a chance to enjoy that money with aren't even there to enjoy it with. And so they've been making all these sacrifices in anticipation of a life that they'll never get to lead. So I guess my thought is to ask your listeners to imagine a time down the road, 5 years, 10 years in retirement, and imagine what they like, and just make sure that their current actions are leaving room for that to happen, and that they're not sacrificing too much today in pursuit of something that may never occur.
Very, very good. That is so true. Jeff, if we took the time, right, to just do what you just said, that just changed the mindset for the future. And you've dropped so many jewels inside of this. I really, really, really appreciate you being here. And we'll have show notes and contact information. But again, thank you so much for sharing all of your gifts with our listeners.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for doing the work you do to try to shed some light on these topics.
All right. We'll see you next time. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithchrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.